This segment is sponsored by the Richmond Sentinel, providing news, entertainment, and human interest stories in print and online.
His latest book is called Norman Jewison, A Director's Life. He is a cultural writer, UFT professor, and of course an author. It's a great pleasure to welcome Ira Wells from Toronto. Ira, thanks for joining us on Our City Tonight.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Great to have you. Boy, what a life, and it's with TV time, limited time, so I'm going to jump right in. I've been a fan of Norman Jewison since I was allowed to see his movies as a kid. You bring so many things to light that I knew nothing about. Really didn't know a lot about his early life in terms of television. He grows up in Toronto. He starts in 1952 at CBC with no experience, no technical knowledge, and within 10 years, he is directing his first movie in Hollywood with Tony Curtis after establishing a great reputation as a TV director. Talk to our viewers about the early directorial work of Norman Jewison.
Yeah, so as you say, he starts off in the early days of CBC. In fact, one thing that I discovered was that he was in the studio on the night that the first ever televised broadcast emerged from Canada. It was an upside down and backwards CBC logo. So things have changed a bit since then. But that, what really struck me was just the epic duration of his career. The fact that he is literally there the first night that television appears in Canada. Talk about getting in on the ground floor. And his career is punctuated by all these really important moments, even in those early days. He does a television special with Harry Belafonte in 1959, which was groundbreaking in its time. Harry Belafonte, it was the first hour-long TV special to focus on an African-American entertainer. And of course, Jewison was very concerned with racial issues in such later films as In the Heat of the Night and so on. But it all started in those CBC studios on Jarvis Street in Toronto.
And it's remarkable too, and for viewers out there, check out the Belafonte. It's groundbreaking, as Ira said, and the Judy Garland shows he did as well. It's remarkable too because from the very beginning, there's a couple of threads that run through his life and his attitude. It's about the art and the constant battles with commercial versus artistic. But from the very beginning, he's very wary and cautious of the suits, for lack of a better term. And I never realized how much of a constant difficulty that ran through his whole career, as great as it was.
Ran through the whole thing. That's such an astute point. Right from the early days of CBC, and I think that he may have departed for CBS, partly due to some of those creative differences and really wanting to be able to call his own shots creatively. That runs through the whole career, and that really stems from the fact that he thought of. He really felt that there was a kind of dignity to the art, a dignity to whether it was motion pictures or in those early days television, but it wasn't just about entertainment. He didn't want to, he wouldn't direct his own commercials. For example, in those very early days of TV, they would have live commercials and he wouldn't direct those parts. He would refuse and insist that somebody else directed those parts. The clashes with the suits are kind of legendary. I think that's those were some of the most fun parts of the book to write. They often don't like him very much. He's very headstrong, and it really is about that vision and about what do I have to do to. And we called it the dance, right? Persuade the people in the room, the people who control the purse strings, control the money. How do you bring that vision out? That was a big part of what being a director is to him.
And it's remarkable because his career was so long, and I've read so many biographies over the years where you're a big fan of somebody and then you get into it and you find out what a nasty person they were. It was so wonderful to see that everybody, and I'm just talking about actors from Doris Day in the early 60s up to Denzel in the late 90s and in the 2000s, where everybody said, you know what, I didn't always agree with him, but he was such an actor's director, I should say. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
That everybody loved the fact that they could battle, but it was always about the art.
Absolutely. And when you think about, just the roster of actors who he worked with over the years, from, as you say, Doris Day, Tony Curtis, in those early years, up through James Caan, Denzel Washington, Bruce Willis, Sylvester Stallone. There's so many. Burt Reynolds, Goldie Hawn. Al Pacino. He really did work with everyone. And the reason why, and that was because he was such an actor's director. And this is another thing that I learned in the process of writing the book, is that, if he had one truly great skill, I think it was that he knew what an actor needed.
I don't have a lot of time left, Ira, but I wanted to mention that these pockets of creativity that are so different with him. Mid-60s, it's Cincinnati Kid, it's The Russians Are Coming, In the Heat of the Night, and then you go to the early 70s and you get, in the span of a couple of years, Fiddler on the Roof, Jesus Christ Superstar, and Rollerball in a short period. I want to wrap, though, with a movie that is in my top 5 to 10, and that is In the Heat of the Night, because for people that are a lot younger, one of the iconic moments of the 60s, and he has two of them in my mind, is Sidney Poitier slapping actor Larry Gates playing Endicott in The Heat of the Night. A black man slapping a white man's face. 1967-68, unheard of, but a monumental moment in the history of film.
Absolutely, and it's really a moment where you can see things. That slap had a larger than life significance. It went beyond the movies. It was like a moment when the civil rights movement changes. It was truly one of those iconic moments in film when Sidney Poitier is investigating this rich kind of plantation owner, and he is this rich white guy is totally affronted that Sidney Poitier, who plays the detective in the film, could possibly accuse him of a crime. And he slaps him right across the face. And before, there's not even it's like a physical response. It's just like physics. Sidney Poitier decks him right back. And I think it was a moment that, people were aghast. That didn't happen in the movies. But it was just, you could feel that the energy was changing. It was like the civil rights movement had taken on a new valence, a really iconic moment of cinema, and Norman Jewison, helped bring that moment to life.
Which it really is, I think, despite the fact that he was criticized for not being a great director because there was no through line. In my book, there were through lines all through all his movies, and that's one of them. And as RFK said, and you quote this in the book, the time was right. Poitier and Jewison were right place, right time. Hey, listen, I wish we had more time because there's so many other movies I'd like to talk to you about. I will wrap up by saying I think his legacy, founder of the Canadian Film Centre, look that up as well. He's done so much for Canadian filmmakers, which I've always said need more help even today. The book, Ira Wells, a great read. If you don't know much about Jewison, check this book out and see his movies because they are excellent and diverse. Ira, thank you for joining us on Our City Tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.
This segment was sponsored by the Richmond Sentinel, providing news, entertainment, and human interest stories in print and online.